All right, welcome back to Chapter 2 of Drafting 1. Next thing we're going to talk about is drawing vocabulary. So different things you need to be aware of when we talk about drawings. The first one are the lines. Those are projected line drawings that we use. There's different patterns that represent different things. So if we're talking about a water line or an electricity line or a power line or a sewer line, all of those are going to be depicted differently on a drawing, and not just by color, but actually by the way that the shape that line is. The next thing is lettering. When we are doing our drawings by hand, we're not just going to scribble on the page, okay? We're actually going to letter. So back, in kindergarten when you learned how to draw your letters, we need to make sure that we follow that same standard practice and we letter our drawings. We don't just write on them. Measurement systems, we're going to learn both about the metric and U.S. customary units and how those work on drawings. We're going to talk about scale. What scale is a way to clearly convey, the size of those objects. We need to make sure, we might draw the entire state of West Virginia on on one sheet of paper, or we might just draw, our house on a sheet of paper. How do we convey to somebody that difference in relationship of sizes? Title blocks, most drawings will have some type of information on them, like your name, the drawing scale, the sheet size, how big is the sheet of paper that this is supposed to be printed out on, other things. And title blocks are typically created by whatever company you work for. I'm going to create a title block that I want you guys to use for this class, but definitely important. Not only do we have to have those lines on the page, but you have to tell me, when they were created and who created them and for what company. So next thing we'll talk about is called the alphabet of lines. Basically, you're going to see lots of different lines on paper, and each one means something differently based on its width and the particular line style that lines have. Usually, all of our lines are going to be uniform in width and darkness. So this comes to play when you use that pen and you start creating these lines. It makes a difference how hard you push, because the harder you push, the darker the lines are. The harder you push, the wider the lines are. So this is where, comes a little bit of an artistic side to be a good hand drafter. So here's some examples here. Over on the left, we've got center lines, and those happen to be a long and a short and a long. So here's an example, and then these are free-handed. These aren't, using your drafting tools, but there's a good example up there at the top. Here are some examples where maybe this one's too light and this one down here is a little bit too thick. This next set over is called a hidden line, and those are dashes, okay? So again, example of good, and then these are, don't do those examples. And then over here on the right, we've got an example of a visible line, or just a plain, simple line. So here's one that's not very straight, okay? Here's one that's a little bit too light. So you get the idea. And again, those were sketches. Didn't have to use your drafting tools to come up with those, but you get the idea. On page 29 of your textbook, it's going to go through the alphabet of lines, or all the various types of lines that you might see in a drawing. So here's some visible lines. There's an example right here, just a straight, solid line. Then we have a hidden line. So you've got a long and then a small space, dash and a small space, dash and a small space. Now, your textbook gives numbers to those, but that's not necessarily true. These numbers that you see here on the textbook are only good if you're, drawing on maybe 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. Then those measurements would work. But you get the idea. Section lines are located down here, and the section lines are these angled 45-degree angle lines that you see in this area. Those are called section lines, okay? Then we have, we have, get to the right screen here. We have center lines, which are long, then a short, then a long and a short, and they continue that same pattern. So all the longs are the same length, all the short ones are the same length, and here's an example of what a center line might look like right here. So you look at that and you go, I don't see the pattern. Well, here's the long, short, long, short, long, short, and long, okay? So it's kind of hard to see sometimes, but it's there. You also will see a center line when you have lines of symmetry. So here's this example here with the long, short, long, but then these double bars here and here are meaning that something is symmetrical left to right. That's what that means. So continuing on page 29, you've got dimension lines. So that's what this is up here, dimension and extension lines. We'll talk about those a little bit later on, but there's where you might see one in a drawing. So you're going to have a value, you're going to have some arrowheads, and you're going to showing me that the distance between this point all the way across to this point is 86 units. That's what this picture is showing me. You've got leader lines. That's what this is right here. Okay, just something with an arrowhead on the end, comes up at an angle, and then a little flat line, and then your text might show up over here. So this right here, this orange, is an example of a leader line. So is this one right here. Both of those are leaders. You've got cutting plane or viewing plane lines. That's what these are down here. We'll talk about those more when we talk about taking a section of an object. We've got break lines. That's what this is right here. Okay. We'll explain that more later on when we talk about sections. Here's another break line. You might see something that looks like that. Looks kind of like an EKG monitor. We have phantom lines. Now don't get confused. These are a little bit different from center lines. These are long, short, short, long, short, short, that pattern. And so in this example over here, it's showing me that this piece rotates about this fixed station point. So as this piece moves left to right, this circle will follow this path. That's what that phantom line, and that's what this is, a phantom line, and then all of this in here is drawn with the phantom line. So it's kind of used to show motion in a drawing. We also have stitch and chain lines, and we're not going to talk about those in this class. So next, measurement systems. I'm going to go ahead and pause on this one, and then we'll start one more time with the third video for this section in measurement systems.